That is exciting. That is exciting. Thank you for the faculty and the staff who brought the students over. This is such an important event. You get a chance to meet some of our state leaders. And today we have with us State Representative Reginald Bolding from District 27. So let's give him a round of applause. And we also have a great faculty and staff that represent this great institution. We have our deans here and our leaders here. So if you're a PC faculty or staff member, please stand to be recognized quickly. Let's give them a shout out and love on them. PC faculty and staff. Hopefully, you students will pay close attention and you'll have great questions for Representative Bolding at the end. Because I'm sure many of you are interested in the work that he does and really how that really supports the colleges and how it supports much of what happens, you know, in the community with mom and dad and having these courageous conversations. You can kind of hear what a lot of that is about as it relates to legislation and education, civil rights, and so many other topics. So let me tell you a little bit about this great gentleman here. While he is the state representative, he's also a father, he's also a husband, he has a beautiful family, and he's also Floridian, right? No, I'm sorry, the wife is a Floridian, so they're one and the same, so I get them mixed up. But just a little information about our guest today. So Reginald Bolding was reelected to serve a third term in Arizona House of Representatives. Bolding was elected by his colleagues to serve in the Democratic leadership as the House Minority Whip. And Representative Bolding, we certainly will want to know what that means at some point so our young people will get more context. He serves as the ranking member of the House Education Committee and sits on the Ways and Means Committee. Mr. Bolding is a first-generation college student. Was an outstanding scholar in both education and justice studies. He graduated top of his class from the University of Cincinnati, where he earned his undergraduate degree in criminal justice and international security. He has established himself as one of the most respected legislators in the chamber, working on legislation that focuses on education, economic development, criminal justice, veteran services, and veterans and civil rights. Bolding is one of the leading advocates fighting for issues directly impacting our vulnerable Arizonans. So please, again, welcome State Representative Reginald Bolding. So, this speaker series, if you will, was created a couple of months ago to just humanize our speakers. I wanted an opportunity for our students, our faculty and staff, and our community leaders to really get a sense of who serves our great community, who's advocating for us in terms of our education, policy, what's taking place in terms of the civil rights conversations. So we've had great speakers, as many of you already know, and we're concluding the spring term with one of our leaders who's actually in the community, boots on the ground, doing amazing work. So we will continue to do these series in the days to come, and we'll bring speakers that meet in terms of what's happening in the community and align with what's taking place at the college. So today, we would like to start off now by just you, Mr. Bolding, just sharing a little bit about your background, where you're from, and what has inspired this role of advocacy.
First, I do want to say thank you, Dr. Johnson, for having me here. Having an opportunity to allow individuals from the community to come here to share, their stories, their work with the students, the faculty, I think it's impactful. So first, thank you for this series and giving me the opportunity. My story is one of, I don't think it's a story that's very different from a lot of people. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. I was born and raised primarily by my mother. So she was a single mom. She had 3 boys. I was the middle child, all sons. For me, growing up, I always wanted to be a lawyer. So I would stay up at night and I would watch TV shows like Law and Order and The Practice, and I would pretend to stand in front of the TV screen and be that lawyer, like grilling the witness on the stand, because that's just what I wanted to do, was fight for the community or fight for my client. But I didn't really know what path to take to become a lawyer. At one point, I thought you could go from high school to law school because I didn't know the questions to ask. But when people would ask me what I wanted to be, I would say what a lot of my friends would say: I want to be a football player or a basketball player. because that was the safe answer. It seemed very safe to say that, because I didn't want to tell them I wanted to be a lawyer because I didn't know those next steps. In fact, I'd never seen a professional, someone who wore a suit or went to, and worked in an office. And so I was in college. My teachers were the first professionals that I ever had in my classroom growing up, and because of strong teachers and advocates, they really helped me and my mom when we didn't know what path we needed to take in order for me to have an opportunity to go on to college.
Awesome. So you touch on something, and we both shared a story of growing up in single-parent households. Could you just briefly talk about, in terms of your work and working, in communities that are underrepresented and underserved, how important it was to have, that mother backing, but also have those community persons that you could depend on to help you to actualize those dreams? So you mentioned that you didn't see persons who were in suits and their professional attire, but how important is it for our students and important for these young people to understand that they have to surround themselves with persons, if they are from a single parent household or not, that will help to cultivating them that skill set to get them to the next level?
Mentorship is huge, and if you don't have a mentor, or if you don't know what a mentor is, I just want to kind of tell you, a mentor is basically someone that you can go to and ask advice from and also look up to. A mentor could be someone that you have a conversation with every single day, or it could be someone that you admire from afar. And for me, I had a mentor that I luckily had an opportunity to see every day. So when I got to college, that's also the first time I realized I was poor. So in college, when you're applying to college, you take something called the FAFSA, or you fill out the FAFSA. And it was there, I filled out the FAFSA, and I realized that my mom hadn't made a lot of money. But growing up, I really didn't understand what a lot of money was. But it was there that I realized, wait, there's things that I don't have, or that I just never had, and I didn't realize those are certain things that I should probably have. And there was content and learnings that I never had an opportunity to learn, and it wasn't until I got to college and were around other people who had those opportunities. But in college, I had a mentor. His name's James Johnson. He created a program called SWELL, and it stands for Summer Work Experience in Law. And it was primarily for African American students of color who were first generation in their family going to college, and they wanted to enter law. And at that time, he provided us with internships at these law firms in downtown Cincinnati, and we also had internships at these major corporations like GE and these major corporations. We were Procter and Gamble, and I remember my assignment was to be an intern at this law firm called Thompson Hines. So I remember going downtown Cincinnati my first day. I bought my first ever suit and my first ever tie. I was ready, and I went inside of the building and got on the elevator. So the law firm had about 500 attorneys. So the top 5 floors were all attorneys. I remember walking in the door. I met the administrative assistant. She shook my hand and she said, "I'm going to take you to where you'll be staying." So I'm really excited, and I remember her walking me around the corner, several corners, and then I had a cubicle with a nameplate, and I was in a directory. I was like, yes, this is it. This is what it's like to be a lawyer. I had a directory, a computer, I had a nameplate. I was like, this is really cool. I say that to say, at that time, I had never been in a law firm before, had no clue what to expect. During that summer, I was able to interact with other attorneys and realize that they're just people like us. And I think that's what your series does, is really humanize, because while I may serve in the state capitol, I'm just the same as every single student here. There's nothing different that I do that you don't do. And that really taught me that at that moment. And it's because of that mentor, James Johnson, put me in that opportunity.
That's awesome. So you talk about desiring to move into law school. And then we also learned that you turned down that potential opportunity or that interest at that time to move into special education. So special education in South Phoenix. Why South Phoenix and why special education?
Yeah, so I learned after that internship, I learned that in order to get into law school, you have to take a test, and this test is called the LSAT. And I had no clue about this test before. Which, when I think about it, it's amazing that I was a sophomore or a junior at that time, a junior in college, and had never known that the LSAT existed. Just because I didn't know what questions to ask, I didn't know. And I took that test, I did pretty well, got offered a full ride law school scholarship, and I was like, yes, I'm on my way. And I wanted to be a lawyer for two reasons. Now, one was because I really wanted to fight for the community and fight for my clients. And second, I grew up poor. I wanted to have a career where I can make a little bit of money. I said, I've been poor, I want to try something different. So I wanted to also be a lawyer so I could have a career that would make some money. But, one thing that was just, deep and embedded into me, it was that when I graduated from high school, there wasn't a lot of students like me that had an opportunity to go on to college and who weren't getting those opportunities to be in positions like me. So I decided to turn down that full ride law school scholarship to become a teacher out here in South Phoenix at a school called Percy L. Julian in the Roosevelt School District. And for me, the reason why is I just wanted to try something entirely new. Again, I grew up in a small town in Ohio. I wanted to, move across the country and try something new, be independent, see what's around the world. And literally walking into my classroom with my students, I just seen so many similarities from the experience that I had growing up, and really wanted to, what I thought would just be 2 years spending time in a classroom with my kids, really transformed into a career in education and a life commitment of making sure that kids in all communities, no matter what zip code they live in, they have access to a great education.
That's awesome. And I'm sure that spawned the interest now into where you are now, serving this community. So talk to me a little bit about transitioning from college to being a special education teacher, and now you're sent to politics. Talk to us a little bit about that trajectory.
Yeah, so teaching in the classroom, I love it. I love it. So anytime I get an opportunity to go into classrooms, whether it's middle school classrooms, high school classrooms, I just really love engaging with students. For many people, when I say I was a middle school teacher, they're like, middle school? I'm sure that was hard. I'm like, I loved it. I loved students who had the attitudes and figuring out who they were, and the boys would look at the girls a certain way, the girls would look at the boys. When they like each other, they would hit each other. And so I'm like, wait, that's not the way that you show that you care about somebody. I loved that, right? Because our students were trying to figure out who they were. And for many of our students, the way that they learned, was just by doing it. They really hadn't had a lot of role models, just because, you often be what you see. And if you don't see role models specifically in your community, people who you can identify with, it's hard. So I just really loved teaching, and my students and I, we did some great games in our classroom. But one of the things I also learned was that my students were facing a system that was not providing them with opportunities to be successful. So as much as I worked as hard as I could with my 7th graders and 8th graders in math and reading, I knew once they went to high school, they would be at a high school with 3,000 other kids, and they may not receive the same instruction that they had in my classroom in that safe environment. And even while they're there, they wouldn't have a counselor. Right now in Arizona, our student-to-counselor ratio was 1 counselor to every 900 students. So I knew they wouldn't have that intense interaction. And it wasn't because the teachers there didn't want to embrace them, or the counselors there didn't want to embrace them. It's just that we're in a system that, for students, a lot of students of color, a lot of students who grew up in low-income communities, there aren't the resources there. It hasn't been prioritized to have the resources there for them to get all of the things that they need. And for me, I said I can change my classroom, but it's really about changing the system. And I don't want to just affect the 20 kids in my classroom. I want to affect the 1.1 million students in our K-12 education system. And I figured the only way to do that was to change the law and change the policies. And that forced me to run for office. And I eventually won.
Awesome. Let's congratulate him for that. 3 times, right? 3 times. So, as a politician, you have the opportunity to work across, different understandings and systems of belief. Talk a little bit more about that process of being a politician and education. What's currently taking place in terms of your scope of influence as far as education? What should we see on the horizon?
Well, I think one thing that's important for people to know is that, all laws were put in place by people. And I think at its basic level, we all understand that, but when you start to peel back the layers, I don't think people really do, right? So at one point in time in this country, I wouldn't even be allowed to sit here because the law didn't give African Americans an opportunity to participate, right? At one point in time, the law didn't allow women to vote. Like, these were laws in place put by people in their time. So every single thing that we have taken place here in this country, and rules and laws, they were put in place by people. So when there's an action that you take, there's because there's a law that puts you there. And for me, I didn't really understand that, if people don't have a strong understanding of, underserved communities, if people don't have a strong understanding of what it's like to be a teacher, if people don't understand what it's like to grow up in a single parent household, then it's nearly impossible for them to create laws that are going to serve those populations because it's not front of mind. They're not thinking about that. And for me, I said that, the students in my classroom, they're dealing with so many different issues, and it's up to me to bring their voice down to the state legislature. And I think about a student of mine named Daquan, and Daquan would walk to school every single day with his little sister. And on that walk to school, Daquan had to walk in the street because there was no sidewalks during the route from his house to his school. So first of all, Daquan had to walk in the street because there is no sidewalks. And people don't realize that government, like city councils, they can make sure that there's sidewalks on streets, right? So, he walked to school in the street to go to school. He would have to drop off his little sister at the elementary school across the street, and then he would come to school. Then he would come to our middle school. So that's a route that Daquan would take. One thing that was also important for Daquan is anytime that his sister was sick, he had to stay home from school, and he would miss a lot of class time because his mom was a single mom as well, and she couldn't afford to take off work because if his mom would have took off work, that could have meant that there wasn't food on the table or they weren't able to pay the bills. So Daquan often had to suffer at the expense. His education had to suffer at the expense of the family, and Daquan was only 13 years old, and that's not okay. So we have to think about how we can put in place, programs that would ensure that, that there is, a daycare available, that there are programs that will allow our parents, that we have paid sick leave. So if you're a parent and your child is sick, you can stay home with your child and you don't have to be penalized. You can still get paid. And in 2016, there was a law, Proposition 206, that allowed for that to happen. So there's bills like that that really empower me to say that we have to have all voices heard, and people who may not have experienced these issues, it's not that they don't care about all communities, it's just for many, they just don't know the experience or the perspective.
Right. And one of your roles in part of your work is being a minority whip, and I wanted to go back to that so that the young people understand what exactly does that really mean to them? Why is that should that be important for them to understand and know?
So in politics, there's really two mainstream parties. You guys probably already know them. You have your Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And each party at the state capitol, we elect leadership. And leadership are essentially people who are designed to help the other politicians or state lawmakers. Their job is to help guide them on issues and negotiate big problems. So for me, I'm in the Democratic leadership. So I'm a Democrat, and I'm part of our Democratic leadership team. So I help negotiate with the governor's office and help negotiate with Republicans on really big issues. And my job within leadership is the whip, which means that my job is to make sure that I can convince all of my colleagues how to vote for an issue or how to not vote for an issue. So I have to know what everyone's thinking. So, I need to know what everyone is thinking, what issues matter most to them, why they're gonna support a bill, why they're not gonna support a bill, and how to actually leverage things that they care about in order to get them to vote on a bill. So it's something that keeps me very, very busy. But if you are a person who likes talking to a lot of people and you are a really good listener, you can be a whip as well, right? You gotta know how to listen to people, what they care about, and also, know how to negotiate. That's one of the biggest things about being a Democratic whip.
How many of you want that role? None of you?
I see one.
So I want to pause for a quick second and take a question from the audience. So I'm sure you've heard a lot thus far. What question would you have to ask in terms of what Representative Bolding does, maybe something that he said that has sparked an interest in you, that you want to know more about? I'll call on somebody because you're all students, so that means you have to be ready, right? So if you don't call, okay, where's the person? Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So there's a microphone right there if you could go to it.
You got this. Thank you for showing leadership. Oh, I was just talking to Mike.
So what do you do on a regular day basis at work?
Great question. So, and what was your name again?
Kenyon.
Kenyon?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for asking that question and showing leadership to come up here and ask that in front of your peers. So there's never a single day. Every day looks different. At a basic level, wake up every morning and then wake up my little baby girl. She's 2 years old, and she's always like, "Daddy, I don't want to get up." Every morning. Drop her off at school, then head to the state capitol, and it really begins with meetings. So we have to get briefed, and what a brief means is that on major issues that happen, people come in and they tell us those issues. So for instance, there was something really, really big that happened. This actually happened last week. So in our schools, we have classes for English language learners. It's a 4-hour block. Some students may have been put in a 4-hour block if you're an English language learner. And really what that did for a lot of our students was it separated them from their classmates because it didn't give them an opportunity to get to build the relationships with their other classmates because they had to go at this, in this ELL block and then take the Azella test, and then if you have to take the Azella test, then you're allowed to get out. It was just like really a burden for students and for teachers and for parents, and it wasn't really working for our students who were English language learners. So we got briefed on, that bill, and as a state capital, we passed a new law that will get rid of the 4-hour block. So students no longer have to sit in this 4-hour block every single day in order to learn English language. They now have more flexibility. Their teachers have more flexibility. Yeah, you can clap that up. That's a good thing. And that's important because we know that our students, many times, we have to be prepared for that. And we also passed a bill yesterday in committee that will allow for instruction to be taught in multiple languages. It has to go to the ballot, so which means that people have to vote on it in 2020. But I mean, it's a good thing to know more than one language. And in Arizona, for so many years, it was penalized. Like, oh, you speak Spanish, like that's it, like, and not English. But it's a good thing to know Spanish and English and immersion programs. So now we're looking at 2020 to put that on the ballot to actually be able to vote for it. So we just get briefed on different issues, then we vote on those issues, and have different meetings with people who care a lot about things that matter to them. So thank you for asking that.
Another quick question? You have another one? No. Are you ready? You're volunteering? So here's something that's an interesting fact, but it is a fact that we are the fifth fastest growing city nationally. So when you think about that and you think of gentrification and you're underserved, how is that, or did you perceive that as impacting our most vulnerable cities? Because as you drive around every block, I see signs that say protect our homes and do away with the towers, and I'm seeing more and more of that. I'm trying to understand what does that really mean and why is the community so excited about that. So we're the fifth largest, it's great. Many companies are coming out to Arizona, but in Phoenix specifically. So what does that mean for our most vulnerable citizens?
Yeah, so I think at a basic level, so basically when we think about gentrification, if you don't know that word, hold on to it. So gentrification essentially is when you have an area that has been, the prices in homes have been devalued so much. Then people, you have other folks who come in, they buy and they redevelop the area, and now the prices for everything goes up, and the people who used to live there, they no longer can live there. So you've seen like apartment buildings that may have been, not the best structures. They fix them up and now they look really nice, and the rent prices are really, really high, and the people who used to live there, they can't live there no more, so now they get displaced and then new people live there. That's happening in the district that I serve, which is difficult, because I think when you have gentrification in communities, you start to lose some of the history that made a community that community. And the idea of your grandmother owned a home for a number of years, and you would all walk to school. It's almost this idea when everyone in my family all had the same kindergarten teacher, right? We just knew Miss Pogwoods. Now I'm thinking, that's a really weird name, Miss Pogwoods, right? She was our kindergarten teacher. We all had her. And when you think about the community, like there's always a place that everyone would always go and hang out to, like in the community. But now when you go back, it's changed so much. I think one thing that we do is we lose some of the history. But also on the other side, it's important to say that we want the best, right? Like it's not okay that in some places in our community that you have, homes that are literally falling apart. Right, that you have roofs that are caving in, that you have walls and plaster that's just like it's not good, trash, like that's not okay. And for a lot of people, we've been used to subpar living conditions that we think that it's okay, but it's really not. And I think it's important for us to say that, like, we value ourselves so much that we want to have the best things in our community. We want to have, recreation centers for our kids. We want to have restaurants that aren't just fast food. Like, we want to have, bike lanes, when we want to ride our bikes. Like, it's okay to want more things, but it has to be affordable to the people who live there. And as a state, we have to think about how we've historically not giving people an opportunity to have the wages, the money that they need to afford those things. So really quick, if you don't mind, there's a bill taking place in the state legislature right now. And I wrote this bill down because I don't want you guys to forget it. It's House Bill 2523. And what this bill does, and before I tell you what the bill does, so in 2006, a number of students went and knocked on a ton of doors, got a lot of signatures, students, parents, communities, and they said, we want to raise the minimum wage. We don't believe that the wage in this country right now is enough to pay for the things that you need, right? You shouldn't have to sacrifice whether or not I'm gonna pay for rent. And then if I pay rent, that means that like we don't have enough food, and then that means that we can't have life insurance. So if someone like we don't have money for life insurance. So if someone passes, then we have to like ask other people to help money to bury people. It's not okay. You should have money to pay for everything. So a group passed a minimum wage ordinance, passed minimum wage law. So it was a proposition in 2006, and it raised minimum wage to $12 an hour by 2020. So that was big for Arizona because it provided people an opportunity to get a little bit more money in their pocket. We have this bill, House Bill 2523, which basically says that, and the minimum wage right now is $11.50, I believe it's $11.50. And minimum so that's pretty good for a lot of people. And this bill would say that instead of paying the minimum wage for anyone who is 22 years old or younger, they no longer have to get paid the minimum wage. They have to get paid the federal minimum wage, which is $7 an hour. So it's saying, so any of you who decide to work, you don't get an opportunity to get $11.50 an hour. You have to get $7 an hour just because you're young and you don't have families to take care of. Like that's offensive. And it's not cool. So we have to make sure that we are actively fighting for things that matter to our families and fighting for issues that matter to you. So all that bill itself matters to a number of, especially our students here, because it's directly targeted at our students. So people don't have to give you a fair share of money for the job that you actually do.
Which bill is that again? You remember?
So, 2523.
All right.
25.
Remember that. So Phoenix College is a social justice college, and many of the topics and themes that you're discussing really centers around social justice. And you mentioned earlier being the only African American male in inception in some instances in your role. So do you feel that there are many instances of maybe implicit biases, and if so, what are some ways in which you have overcome those type of challenges? And that kind of goes along with how have you overcome different challenges that have been presented before you?
Yeah, no, there's actually a lot of implicit biases that I see and notice, and then also a lot of prejudice. And when I say the word prejudice, a lot of people when they think about the word like implicit bias and prejudice and racism, they mix them all up and they think they're the same thing. But for this instance of prejudice, right, to prejudge, right? I think we all prejudge each other in some way, shape, fashion. Whenever we look at someone, we tend to prejudge them. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't think we should. It's one of those things where you should never judge a book by its cover, which I think is important. I think that, for me, being, a younger black male in my position, I get prejudged all the time, right? And I'm sure there's biases that people have toward things that I may do or say, which is on them, right? I think for me, the only thing that I try to do is to think about ways that I can fight for the things that I care about. And I think if we spend all of our time sort of worrying about how other people perceive us, like we'll go crazy. Like we will legitimately go crazy if we spend all of our time thinking about what other people think about us or say about us. It's important to have that context, but it's also important to know that you are, representing yourself, your family in a positive manner, and also represent people who came before you and who will come after you in a positive manner. That's one thing that I just always think about is that, for me, like there will be another person who will serve in my role. Like I am literally just a seat holder. There will be somebody that will take my spot, and it's up to me to make it a little bit better for them. And when I was younger, I don't think I really understood that, but I think a lot of kids now realize that. Like you are building a perception of what young Latinos or African Americans or Caucasian individuals are, and people behind you will benefit from the work that you do. or they'll get prejudged by the work that you don't do, right? But you can't spend your time thinking about that. All you can do is be your best self, and that's what I just try to be is my best self.
Great. So at this time, we want president. I'll say president.
All right,
Maybe it's
all
coming
right.
at some point, right? So Representative Bolding, if you can just encourage these young people, because many of them are from PCPA, as I mentioned, our Phoenix College Preparatory Academy. If you could impart any nuggets of wisdom that will give them hope for tomorrow, what would you say?
I think the biggest nugget of hope, and even before that, I'll first start with advice. The biggest piece of advice I would say is always surround yourself around positive people. And if you feel like you're the smartest person in your group, then you're probably not part of a really good group, right? Like, you always want to be around people who challenge you, people who have like knowledge, people who have an idea of like what they care about, and that's just important for you, because again, like, many times people are products of their environment, and if you surround yourself in bad situations, bad things happen. And I can tell you, growing up, like, there was things that I did that were not great things to do. It happened because peer pressure is real, but it really takes someone to step out and say, like, I'm going to surround myself around people who have positive mentalities. And surround myself with them. I think another piece of advice, a lot of times as adults we ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would encourage our adults to stop asking kids that. I would encourage you to ask them, what do you love to do? And once students tell you what they love to do, there's a number of things that they can be, right? Because that's how you find yourself in a job or a role that you're passionate about every single day, because you're doing what you love. But I think if people chase, like, I wanna be a teacher, or I wanna be a state legislator, or I wanna be a college president, you wanna like tell me, what do you love, right? Like, if it's like, oh, I love playing video games, and being a state representative probably is not the best. Probably not the best choice. Like, just think about what you love to do. And as you do that, you find opportunities to engage in things that you really, really love to do. That's so important. One piece of advice I would say is just to get involved in everything. And if you get involved in everything, you can really make a change. The reason why I'm really optimistic about this generation of students is my wife and I, in 2016, we started an organization called the Arizona Coalition for Change. So this is my other job that I do every day. And our job is, what we do is we hire students, 15 to 25 years old. And we make exceptions. We hire some old folks too. I'm just kidding. We hire a little bit of older people too. But primarily students. And what we do is we teach our students how to become civically engaged and civically engage others in their community. So we go out and we help register people to vote. We go to community events and talk to them about different pieces of legislation and bills that are happening. We go out and we do projects, community service work, and I can tell you, the kids who are in that program, who are in our organization, are so dynamic and so much smarter than I was at 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. I just know that there is so much that our students will do and can do and will achieve, just because you have so many more opportunities now. Something that would have taken me a long time to do, our kids can literally whip out their phone and Google it, and they know it right there. And I think as educators, we have to think about the times that we're in and say that technology is not a bad thing. It's a tool in order to help us get the information that we need. So I think that's something that I would say is just, I'm inspired by the other students who look like you, who have performed very well, So I prejudge you and say, I know that you will look well, you will do well, because the mark that they have set for you, and that really inspires me.
Okay. So are there any other questions from the audience? We have time for at least 2 questions. Anyone that's not a student? Oh, well, sure. Are the students? Sure.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Satterthwaite, and I'm a teacher at PCPA. My students are probably going to roll their eyes a little bit because I'm always bending their ear about legislation and Congress and the Constitution. This sort of indirectly has to do with another event in the legislature last week. Our Constitution, our laws are full of ideals about equality, justice, and diversity. But how, when we don't see that necessarily borne out even in the people we're electing, do we believe in those ideals? Because a lot of these kids are on the fuzzy end of the lollipop on that. And it's really discouraging, I think, a lot of the time to see those ideals in print and yet see it not borne out in even the people who are getting elected in some places.
No, that's a really great question. I serve in the state legislature with people who I don't share the same views with on many different issues. And in some instances, there's some people who I just really don't like as people. I mean, it's honest, right? I'm sure there's some people who we just really don't like as people. But one thing that I am hopeful in, and one thing that I think that we always get right, is that if people participate, and if people have a good idea and understanding of what they're looking for, I think many times we find those opportunities tend to more often than not, I've seen those people get elected. When I see us not engage, and because we don't like the people who are involved, I think it becomes much more difficult. I think the hardest part is like when you do engage and you fight and you work and then you don't see your candidate there and you're like, how did this happen? That is, it is disheartening. But we also know like Rome was not built in one day. We also know that we cannot change the fabric of this country in like one election cycle or 2 election cycles. And if it was easy, everybody would do it. That's one thing my mom would always say. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. If it was like, but it's not, it's supposed to be hard. And the more that we stay actively engaged, I think that is the more that we'll continue to fight for ourselves and grow, and create frameworks and foundations. Because, there's people who are working behind the scenes, even though that we don't see them every single day, fighting for those people who we may not agree with, but they're being very strategic about it. And I think we just have to overcome sort of this hate with like love and access and opportunity and participation. Hopefully that answers your question.
I like especially participation.
You said when you were first elected that you were the only African American person. Now, nowadays, is there more diversity, but not with just skin color, but with backgrounds?
So great question. So yes, there are. So now there are more African Americans in the state legislature, which is a good thing. There's more African Americans in state government now. So what we've seen is like an increase in the number of women who are serving. Like our ladies are just kicking butt. So like every woman in here, like you guys are like really our future, and I really truly believe in like the women and girls in this room. And I just want to say, don't ever let anyone tell you that you are not as strong or as smart as they are, because I know you are. So we see more women, we see more Latinos in the legislature, and you see more African Americans in the legislature. We actually have this year we have the most diverse state legislature in the history of the state legislature. And the only reason why it happened was because this is the first year ever we've had more young adults vote in the election than we had our seniors vote in the election. That has never happened. It's all like seniors always vote at a higher rate than young adults. But in Arizona, this was the first time ever that you've seen more young people, at 18 to 25-year-old range. They voted more than our 65-year and older range, which was huge. That changes the dynamic of everything, and it really makes bills like this targets for people who don't realize that our young folks are watching and they're excited.
Awesome. So we've seen great men get up and initiate, and then your teacher. So can I get some of our young ladies to come and pose a question? I'm sure there's something burning down on the inside that you want to share.
Are there any young women here interested and concerned about the ERA bill that will probably be shot down by one man? What is that?
Anyone?
Someone asked, what is the ERA? So basically, and as I'm saying this, feel free, ladies, to come up to the mic. I'm just giving some filler space. Yes, all right. So the ERA is essentially the Equal Rights Amendment, and it's really foundational, letting individuals know that we believe that women should have all of the same rights as men, and that your pay shouldn't be determined based on whether or not you're a man or not, whether you're a man or a woman, that everyone should have fair pay and equal rights. So that is something that we have to fundamentally fight for throughout this state, throughout this country, because we know our ladies can do just as good, if not a better job, than many of our men.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn Alvarez, and my question is on, does your mom ever look back and say and have talks with you how did you go from doing this to now being who you are now? And do you ever teach? I mean, your daughter's still young, but do you ever plan on her doing what you do nowadays, or just do you have any plans or anything?
Thank you for that question. That's actually a really, really good question. So I can say, how do I want to start this? So my mom is absolutely, she was very proud of myself and my brothers. So my mom never had more than a high school education, but her goal in life was to make sure that her kids did. And I think many parents want to make sure that their children have a better opportunity than they did. So my mom, she actually died in 2013. And she actually passed right before I got elected, because I got elected in 2014. And it was one of those things where it was really bitter. It was really bittersweet. I mean, I found myself in this point where I remember my mom called me one day and she was like, hey, I need you to come home. I would always be the person who would read certain things from her mom from a different perspective, or go to the hospital with her, because when you go to the doctor's office, they start saying stuff that you really don't know what they need to say. You're like, wait, say it in English? What are you talking about? So I remember going to the doctor with her. What we learned is that my mom actually had cancer. She had stage 4 cancer, lung cancer, which means that that's the last stage. And it was at that point where it was really hard for us, for me, my brothers, for her, because I know my mom fought so hard for us, and we never think about what's life like without our parents. And I'm sure that was just something that we had to think about. And for my mom, she was again a strong, independent woman who fought for her kids. And we got to a place where instead of her taking care of me, I had to take care of her. And I will never forget her letting me know that, she may not have had the opportunity to do everything that she wanted with her life, but she was going to live through her kids. And she really tried, she really showed that every single day, even before she passed. And in 2014, I wasn't sure if I was going to run, but I really just thought about my mom and her, and saying that, it's an obligation for us to fight for folks who can't fight for themselves. And for me, my mom didn't have health insurance. There was a law passed in Ohio that said if you were an adult and you no longer had, children who were no longer in school, you would be taken off of their healthcare system. And essentially what that law did was take away my mom's health insurance, so she couldn't go to the doctor often to actually get checkups. So when she did go to the doctor, it's because, she felt so bad, like it was just hard for her. And that's when we found out that she had cancer. And for me, I said, I don't want anybody else's mom to have to avoid going to the hospital because they don't have health insurance. And it's like an obligation for me to fight to make sure that people can get the preventative care that they need, and for everybody. So that's a significant issue. So that really pushed me. And when I think about my daughter, I want her to really truly do whatever she wants to do. My goal is to help provide as many opportunities for her as possible. When I think about growing up, when I was your age, I didn't even know my job existed. Now she's gonna have more opportunities to know that it does, and with that, I'm gonna expect a lot more of her. By my age, I'm expecting her to be president. That's no, it's gonna be a lot more expectations for her.
Please join me again in thanking Representative Reginald Bolding for being here with us.